My name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Hi, hello. Welcome to a little sci-fi video. This is gonna be kind of a chat through a bunch of different vibes of sci-fi and also be a recommendation video, all of the above. And once again, I apologize if you hear anything in the background. Freya is currently playing with a wand toy that has a bell on it. So if you hear any jingling, that's what that is. Anyways, all right, so I have stacks of books in front of me. I have everything from dystopian to fun sci-fi to genre-bending sci-fi to what I consider to be like epic space operatic sci-fi. It has that vibe, epic space operatic sci-fi, if you will. And I also have, let's lower that just a smidge. It's a little better. I also have TBR, stuff in my TBR. So I love sci-fi. I started going on a little bit of a journey with my sci-fi back in, I believe it was 2021. I started with a video on this channel, actually it was a two-parter, where I did like a reading out of my comfort zone. It's a series that I used to do where I read in a genre that was out of my comfort zone, and I started with sci-fi because sci-fi is something that I was terrified of back when I started my journey with sci-fi. In that video, I dabbled across many different kinds of sci-fi. I ended up reading, I believe, Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel, which didn't work for me, but it's more of like a near future, currently now, like, or more near future, which is like very words, more near future than a lot of the like space operatic stuff that I've read. So I'd consider that one more along the lines of like Hank Green's An Absolutely Remarkable Thing than anything else, but I just didn't like the way that it was formatted. It was a weird format. That's like, I was reading that one, and I also read Becky Chambers for the first time. I read Red Rising for the first time as well. I'm not going to talk about Red Rising in this video though, because Pierce Brown is a known Zionist and is in support of the genocide in Palestine, so we do not support his work on this channel. So I read that one as well, and I read, I believe, Emily Skrutsky's Bonds of Brass, which was really interesting to me because it felt a little bit more YA and a little bit more action-packed type of vibe, very compulsively readable, that kind of a thing. I went on a whole journey. It was a time, and it was great because it set off a love of sci-fi in me. I will always be a fantasy girly, as is hence the books behind me, but there's something special about sci-fi, and I just love it. Sometimes I crave it now, which is phenomenal. The more you look at sci-fi, just like with fantasy, you can find so many different kinds of sci-fi in their subgenres, right? So you have everything from the dystopian or more near future stuff, you have the full space operatic, almost like an epic fantasy level of stuff, and then you have everything in between. You have fun sci-fi, you got some serious sci-fi, you got speculative, all of the above, you know? So I don't even know where to start. I guess I'll start with the dystopian because I did talk about dystopia in a recent video of mine, and I have these 5 books here, which are, in my mind, dystopia, close future type of situation sci-fi. So we have everything from the classic Parable of the Sower and the Hunger Games, of course, the dystopia. These are the best of the best. We have Chain Gang All-Stars, which again, phenomenal. This is a less of a typical sci-fi, I would say. Like, this doesn't really involve a lot of tech or anything you would expect from being in a sci-fi world, which really, I guess the basics of the genre that you would expect going in are tech, lots of interesting technology, if not in the future in some kind of way, I think is really the baseline for sci-fi for me, science fiction, if you will. This to me is dystopia, near future situation. Freya's underneath the blanket on my couch right now. It's very good. Let's see if I can get it. That's her. That's the little lump. This is the entertainment that I deal with on a daily basis. Anyways, this is probably the least sci-fi on this list, except for one of the speculative books that feels a little bit more fantasy to me, but it's speculative, so I guess it kind of hits on the science fiction type of scale. It's probably the one I'm gonna have to shoehorn most into this. But this is an examination of the American prison system and how far it can go to be absolutely abhorrent, and where are the limits, with privatization and the dramatization of all of this. And it's an incredible book. I highly recommend this. But yeah, it does feel sci-fi to me because it is near future type of situation, which anything near future to me is sci-fi. Like Scythe by Neil Shusterman, sci-fi to me. Again, near future. We're dealing with a utopian society. I think, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but anything that is deemed near future, utopian, dystopian is under the sci-fi umbrella. Definitely this one. And then of course, our classic dystopians. Octavia E. Butler is one of sci-fi's most brilliant writers. I also have Wild Seed from her on my TBR and the sequel to this one, Parable of the Talents, which I'm very excited to get to. But yes, dystopian at its finest. In this, I would also say the tech is minimal, if anything, because the world is falling apart. But again, near future, sort of. Actually, this is set in 2024 to 2027, so like right now. But when it was written, it was future. So like 1984, that kind of a vibe. And of course, The Hunger Games. This one, I think, is probably the best to explain that like near future, but after this huge calamitous feeling type of sci-fi, where you have Panem, which is the remnants of America, after a huge like nuclear war type situation has occurred. It's hundreds of years later or whatever, 75 years later, I don't know. It's after, way after this has happened, and it's the dregs. It's the crumbling bits of society at the same time as having like this brilliant glittering capital with all of its insane technology and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's the dystopia, the technology vibe that I think of. This is also fantastic. If you've never read it, put it on your list. And I also have Gutter Child here by Jael Richardson, which is on my TBR, so I don't know much about it, but I know it's dystopian. I should have put that with my TBR stack. Oops. And then I also have here one that is not necessarily dystopian in flavor from what we recognize as dystopian, but is something that is definitely near future sci-fi, which to me, anything near future sci-fi feels a little dystopian because it's a little creepy at what the universe and our society has done to get us there, you know? This one, The Deep Sky by Yume Kitase, is set at a time where humanity is trying to save itself while the planet is crumbling. So again, very near future, you know, that kind of thing, where it sends like 100 women up in a spaceship to try and continue to flourish and find safe haven up there, right? So it's the expansion of technology and the universe as humans know it. This does not include any aliens or anything of that like, but it is a very like near future. Our world is crumbling, so this is our only solution type of situation. So that's why I included this. This is good. It didn't quite hit as good for me as her more recent book, but still a great book. And then, because I mentioned them, why not? We'll talk about the two speculative books. These are books that fall to me in the sci-fi fantasy weirdness blanket that no one knows how to really classify, you know? So we have Water Moons by Samantha Soto Yambao and Moonbound by Robin Sloan. These are both fantasy speculative sci-fi books, and I'm really only including them here because speculative is a branch of sci-fi. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I know, speculative is a branch of sci-fi. Moonbound specifically, though, is constructed like a classic quest narrative. It is 11,000 years in the future, and it has remnants of tech from between now and then in it. So it is a very unique sci-fi, in my opinion, even though we have dragons and weird magic and that kind of a thing. But there is technology in here that is very advanced and not of this world. So that's where the sci-fi comes in. Watermoon, probably less so. This is probably more of a fantasy than anything because of the speculative portal aspect of the different worlds and that kind of a thing. But again, because it's speculative, it falls under the sci-fi umbrella. And this is really good. This reads like a Studio Ghibli movie, and it's phenomenal. It's very whimsical. We love this one. This one is also near future because this is set very much like now. It just has these weird extraterrestrial type of things added in with the corals that come to Earth. And it's this new thing that also includes some manipulation of dream, and there's weird tech in that, and this is great. This is also a really good one. I highly recommend this duology by Hank Green. It's phenomenal. It's a really interesting look at like how fame kind of corrupts people. It's interesting. Now to the ones that bend genre. even further than a speculative book would. These are like the true sci-fi fantasies in my mind. So we have everything from Principle of Moments by Esme Chikiemi Pearson. This deals with time travel, Doctor Who-esque. It is, to me, a little more sci-fi than it is fantasy, but it deals with prophecies and these old stories and these old creation myths, all wrapped up with this like time traveling, going to the year 6066 and then back to Victorian times and all that kind of stuff. So like, it is a time travel book. It is phenomenal. It's so good. On the back, Ben Aronovich says that this is a grand space opera where anything can happen and usually does at great speed. But because this is pitched as like a fantasy sci-fi, it has the elements of fantasy novels in it. I think this lands more along the lines of Star Wars does in the sci-fi universe, because Star Wars, my friends, has magic. Because what is the Force? It's magic. So this kind of lands where I would put Star Wars in the sci-fi zeitgeist, if you will. And then we have the, like, again, very utopian society. I would not put this as dystopia though. This is just a time when robots were created and then gained their own sentience and then decided to fuck off into the woods and never see humans again. And this follows Dex, a tea monk who doesn't really know what to do with their life, and they end up meeting one of the robots who's very fascinated with human anything and wants to learn about humanity. So it is like a little utopian nugget of beautifulness. This could either be considered fantasy or sci-fi because it's not necessarily set in our world or in Earth. It feels a little second universe type of thing, or second world, like a lot of fantasy would be, but there's a lot of fantasy out there that's set in our world too. So genre bending. And it's fantastic. I highly recommend this. This is an incredible novella, one of the best. And then we have genre bending of the kind of, we have, again, this one I forgot was sci-fi until the very end. And then I remembered, well, there's mechs in this, which are giant robots that they fight in. But it deals with magic to be able to control these robots. So that's what Iron Widow is. This is like a reimagining, retelling of one of China's like first female emperors or something like that. Like, it's a phenomenal book filled with female rage. We love it. It is definitely a perfect bridge of sci-fi fantasy, in my opinion, because it has all of the magical elements and almost otherworldly, even though it is China, ancient China. It feels otherworldly in the way that it is so unrecognizable with the mechas and the world building, but extremely recognizable with all of the patriarchy and all the problems that Zetian, our main character, goes through. So it is definitely, and there's robots in it, so of course it's space and it's sci-fi, you know? Phenomenal. Highly recommend this. This is YA if you're looking for anything YA. And then we have something like Where Peace is Lost by Valerie Valdez, which to me feels more fantasy than it does sci-fi, but it qualifies as sci-fi because it is set on a different planet. There is space travel mentioned. There are space ships, there are space monsters, space mecha monster type situations, again, on the loose type of situations, and our main character has really interesting armor. And the tech in here is so interesting to me. This one didn't quite hit for me, but it is definitely a softer, slower, more toned down sci-fi where it's more quest-based. It's very uniquely insular. And I think that was really interesting. It says cozy space on here, cozy space fantasy novel. It's not cozy in any way. I wish the publishing would stop using the word cozy to describe a lot of things because they're using it wrong. This definitely was interesting. There's like war machines in here, isolated star systems. Like it has the feeling of a sci-fi novel, but it feels as though like you've taken one of the planets in Star Wars and we've set ourselves completely on this planet and we don't go anywhere else. Like we don't travel in a spaceship, you know? So that's where this one lands in sci-fi. And then we have this one. Gideon the Ninth, one of my favorite book of all time. My girl, my Gideon. This one probably leans more fantasy than it does sci-fi, but again, there's space travel. It's on different planets. It's technically, if you know the lore, in the future. So it's sci-fi. And I'll leave it at that. And then again, we also have things like the 5th season, which could be considered fantasy sci-fi as well, because of the way that it is set up as a world falling apart, calamitous, like very distant future type of situation in here. So this is what I love about genres and like exploring a lot of genres, because there's a lot of breakdown in the lines. It all blurs, you know? Like, as I said, like Star Wars could be considered a fantasy sci-fi or sci-fi fantasy if you wish. Despite all the tech, despite the fact that it's set in space, it has magic. It has that hero's quest. It has the elements of all these different worlds that we travel to in fantasy. And I think that's cool. I think that the fact that fantasy and sci-fi share so much across the genres is honestly phenomenal. Anyways, all right, let's talk about the genuinely epic sci-fi that I think people think of more when you think of sci-fi. Like Dune. But again, could be argued that this could be fantasy. Less so than Star Wars though, because I don't think there's magic in here. It's just like, it's the otherworldliness of going to a new world that a lot of these sci-fi books have in them that is reflective of a fantasy book. It's just the way that it's framed that makes it sci-fi. And all the tech and all the other stuff in here. But yeah, Dune, a classic. Read this if you're interested. I really enjoyed this book when I read it. And I wasn't expecting to, but I know it's not for everybody. So it's a classic for a reason, I guess. I guess. But yeah, so a lot of that like super epic sci-fi boils down into books that feel truly out of this world. So something like The Stars Undying by Emery Robin is one of these weird outliers that doesn't really fit anywhere. It is a retelling of it's a reimagining, I guess, of like the Cleopatra and Mark Antony story, which is very interesting, but it is a sci-fi. But this is like advanced society type of situation. This one I'd actually kind of put in the same category as I would put like A Memory Called Empire. That one is also very interesting. That one deals with more space travel and space tech and that kind of thing. This deals with more personable political movements. So feels a little more fantasy. If you are like a super high political epic fantasy reader, pick this up because this might work for you for that branch into sci-fi. But this is one that I don't really know where to put because it doesn't quite classify in any of these spots. I guess maybe in the genre bending one, but anyways, that's that one. Now we get into the true epic space operatic stuff. And why I put the title space opera on this is because we are actually in space. We are on space ships. We are doing the hecking thing with the technology, with the spaceship. And I love space books that have the actual spaceship in it. I want to read sci-fi that has people in an actual spaceship, you know? So we have some of like the more, this one I think if you're a YA reader would be the best bet to do as a branch from YA to adult sci-fi, because this is adult sci-fi, but it feels more easily readable than a lot of the epic sci-fi space operatic stuff that you're going to get on the shelves today that a lot of people would recommend, like the Adrian Tchaikovsky type of stuff, right? This is one of my favorite duologies of all time. I love it so much. And the way that it combines together like found family and these like betrayals and interesting backgrounds and the heist sort of, I don't really even think it's a heist, but just like the vibes of that, phenomenal. It was so good. It's so good. This duology is one of the best. And honestly, like I didn't read this at the beginning of my sci-fi journey. I read it, I believe last year or the year before. It was the year before. 2023. I love this. This like reignited my love of sci-fi, this book here. It's just so good. It's so good. And then we have books like The Stardust Grail by Yume Kitase, which feels like an Indiana Jones, but in space. And it feels like we are in a Becky Chambers universe, but with a little more action. Because we have interesting aliens in this one. There aren't as many as in A Long Way to a Small Iron Planet, but this is like if you took their previous book, The Deep Sky, it's in a pile. I talked about it earlier. And like that same universe, but just went forward like 500 years, where being in space is normal, but it still has a home base on Earth, you know? So it follows our main character who is a grad student on Earth who's given up her like treasure hunter thief ways, but then gets roped back into it and is back on a spaceship and is hunting for these things on different planets and different systems and all that kind of stuff, and has the technology. And there's also a really cool alien. We love Uncle. We love Uncle so much in this. So there's that kind of a level. This is phenomenal sci-fi. And of course, the GOAT, Becky Chambers, that made me fall in love with sci-fi, and a very specific kind of sci-fi. Yes, I will read the Dunes of it all. Yes, I will read the expanse of it all. But there is something so nice about a humanity level in my sci-fi. And that's not to say that we always have to have humans in my sci-fi. No, no, no. Because the very last Becky Chambers Wayfarer's novel, Galaxy Underground Within, does not have a single human character. They are all aliens, if you will, from other planets, all these created creatures. And it has the most humanity. It has the most, when I say humanity, I want to say like the most like interpersonal connection to the characters, you know? And that's what really helps me get through my sci-fi is, yes, it's so fun to be on these ships with these people and dealing with all this new tech and fighting space battles, but when you actually get to connect to the characters who are going through this as well, it just levels it up. So we have A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which is basically a cozy novel in space with a little bit of extra stuff added in, because it follows a team that's taking the long way to a planet to install a jump bridge there, and it's the journey to get there. That's the book. It's the journey. It's getting to know the characters. It's all of that. And another book that I would recommend in that same vein would be, if you want something a little bit more cinematic, The Last Watch. This feels like if you want a stepping stone to get into something like The Expanse, go for something like this, because this is cinematic as fuck. It feels like it should be a movie and a TV show. Like it truly should be. But the way that the author, I don't know why I was hiding the name, J.S. Dows or Dows or however you say her last name, I still need to look that up. It's been years. The way that she has tied this incredibly epic, operatic sci-fi world down into two characters that you genuinely feel the connections that these characters are making, the choices that they're making. You are so connected to Ada Quinn Rake and Kevin Mercer that it just makes everything so much better. And it makes some of the tech, like if you have a hard time grasping tech like me, a lot of the scientific jargon goes right over your head. You're fine because you're getting the concept of the story, you're carrying on with these characters, and you care so deeply about them and their situation that it works. And that's the kind of humanity that I love in my sci-fi. I want to connect to my characters above all else. And it just makes it better that it's in a spaceship. and with that human connection that you get in those kind of books, you also get books like this, which have a fascinating pull on other subgenres and genres that mixes it all in here. And this is like my perfect sci-fi book because we have a planet that is destroyed, it's on its last legs, it's dying, and we have a bunch of people who have crash landed on this planet and have to survive there. And there's also these eldritch like horror type monsters in the forest that are misprints of people, and so it has the horror elements, and then it also has a banging romance subplot. It's so fucking good. And like I've read something like this where you have a like space exploration landing on a new planet type of situation framework. I've read a couple like that, and this one's my favorite by far. Another one that I've read is Adrian Tchaikovsky's Children of Time, which is a much more advanced sci-fi that hurt my brain to read, but also is kind of fascinating, even though I hated it. Because it has humanity's last efforts on this spaceship, and they're like traveling around the universe trying to find somewhere that is habitable to people. And they find this planet that was supposed to be for humanity, but a long ass time ago, humans fucked up, and there was this explosion, all this kind of stuff, and this virus, this gene that was supposed to be an experiment on apes to like see if they would do the same thing that people did essentially in evolution, goes down and hits this planet and starts doing that with spiders. So we have spiders, and it's a very particular kind of spider. It's just like the way that the genes were perfect in them. And it's only the spiders that like really were affected by this in the same way that humans were. So we have sentient spiders going through evolution and changing and creating cities and all this kind of stuff and having wars and all this at the same time that humans are trying to populate, like to come down. It's a lot. But that's also a book you could read. I've heard great things about Adrian Tchaikovsky. I have only ever read this one, and it really didn't work for me. I would be interested in trying another one of his books, maybe not necessarily that deals with spiders, because that really freaked me out. But this brand of sci-fi is my favorite. Truly my favorite. And again, it kind of leaks into things like The First Sister by Lyndon A. Lewis. It's, again, epic, on space ship type of situation. We're following multiple characters. There's wars happening. There's weird technology in here. It's fantastic. And then we have books like These Burning Stars, which actually this one kind of leans more towards the, oh, where'd it go? it's in a pile. The Emery Robin one, where it feels a little different. It's like a different flavor of sci-fi. It's not as fun. It's not as engaging with the characters, but there is something to it that if you really like these kind of books, like, you're gonna eat this shit up. This is a cat and mouse game across like the universe type of situation. It's crazy. It's a whole thing. We'll just go right into The Expanse. So these are so cool. Before I went into The Expanse books, I was terrified of them because to me they felt like the highest level of like epic fantasy would. And I was really scared of epic fantasy when I was like a kid, right? Because I was like, I don't have the brain for that. It's my bread and butter now. You just have to try it. This is that, I don't know, when you think of a sci-fi, you probably think of something Star Wars-esque. Kind of, I guess, in the vein. Big space vibes, lots of political movements across these different universes with the different people. There's people who are born on space stations. There's this I would also put in the same kind of vein as like A Memory Called Empire with universe-wise. That kind of a vibe. This big universe, space travel, that kind of a thing. Insane tech. This one was so fun. I could not put this one down. This one was a great time, this first one. I've read the second one as well. It didn't hit quite as good as this one did, but I just love the way that it's framed and written because it feels like a mystery TV show that I can't put down, but space. And it makes so much sense that these are now a TV show because these are written so cinematically and it's so fantastic. But it's less character connected. It's less internal and human feeling than The Last Watch or Becky Chambers' book is. This feels more like John Scalzi's work as well. I've read one of his books, The Collapsing Empire, and it just really didn't work for me. It's the kind of sci-fi that just doesn't quite hit for me because it's so epic. We follow so many people that you can't really connect to anything. It's just very tech-based. It's, you know, more, it's bigger. I like something that focuses on a smaller cast of characters that we get to really know them. I need a good mix of character in my book, apparently. And then finally, we're gonna talk about fun sci-fi. Not that all of this hasn't been fun. I mean, there's a difference between reading something like this. Like, this to me is not like a genuinely fun romp of a time. You know, I did not have fun reading this. It was different than that. The vibes were different. The fun vibes come in the books like Cascade Failure, or August Kitco and the Mechas from Space, or Chilling Effect by Valerie Valdez. These are the fun sci-fi books. These I eat up. Oh, also, a big ship. Oh, a big ship on the Something Something to the Universe. Alex White has also written another one that feels really cool. And it is very Star Wars-esque because it has magic mixed in. But again, the hallmark for this kind of sci-fi is the found family, is the antics, is the humor, is the more lighthearted take to a lot of what's going on. Even if you have quite intense shit that's happening, you're still having a great time reading this. August Kitco and the Mechas from Space deals with music and big space robots, which are so fun. And then Chilling Effect by Valerie Valdez is a riot. I had so much fun reading this. Like, these are the fun sci-fi books where it feels like you're watching a campy sci-fi movie. You know, you're not really going to be too stressed out about anything. It's not going to be super dark. It's the fun energy. You know, that's really the only way I can describe it. I highly recommend all of these, by the way. I really love sci-fi. And I love that this journey has taken me on such unique pathways and like finding my taste in sci-fi, because as I said, my taste in sci-fi is something that hits like a Becky Chambers or like a J.S. Dow's, that hits in a very insular human way that allows us to connect to the characters as we are also getting this incredibly huge universe. Or you're having like a Doctor Who time across the universe together and you're creating a family along the way and you're having so much fucking fun and all that kind of stuff, and you're just, you know, maybe you get a little heartbroken or maybe it's a little intense, but it's a lot of fun. And that's my favorite kind of sci-fi, when you have a lot of fun, even though some of it can be a little scary or a little bit intense or, you know, emotional in some kind of ways. That's my favorite kind of sci-fi. And so let's talk about some of the stuff that I have on my TBR. After rambling on for that long. Hopefully you found something that you're like hoping to dive into. If you're looking to get into sci-fi, I highly recommend starting with Becky Chambers, or one of the more near future stuff, like the dystopian stuff, is a really good way to step into it. So start with Iron Widow, or An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green, or Parable of the Sower if you really want to, you know, destroy your heart. and your brain at this point in time in the universe as we are sitting. Or if you want to, like, you know, more fun, Chilling Effect. Always a good idea. Always a good idea to pick up Chilling Effect. If you want that kind of like level of easy readability, but maybe a little bit more serious, for Sister or Seven Devils. These are great. I also would recommend this Until the Day I Die. Lighted Stars. Pick it up. Anyways, these are some of the ones that I have on my TBR. I did mention Gutter Child earlier. This is a dystopian on my TBR. I just picked this one up the other day. It's Hamajang Luck by Makana Yamamoto. This is a sci-fi heist novel. Very excited to see what that entails. I also have this one, which is The Cruel Stars by John Birmingham. This, I fear, may be along the lines of a John Scalzi type of book, which I said is not my favorite. Like, too epic. But hey, it might hit like The Expanse does, so that's why I have it. I also have this one from the library, Activation Degradation, which is a sci-fi standalone by Marina Lasseter, who is the author of Helm of Midnight, which is a fantastic horror fantasy series. Highly recommend that. I'm very excited about this because sci-fi standalone. Ooh, also another one that I highly recommend if you're really into like the horror genre, and if you really like video games. What are they called? They're like the horror games that are set on spaceships that have been overtaken with aliens, like the movie Alien, you know? Pick up The Scourge Between Stars. I think that's what it's called, by Ness Brown. It's a little novella that hit so good for me. So good for me. It was so good. I also have Road to Ruin, which is described by my friend Julie as a like fantasy sci-fi dystopian ride. This apparently is so fun. Last but not least, this bad boy, Spelljammer by Django Wexler, which is part of the Dungeons and Dragons life thing. This is in the world of Spelljammer, which is a module that was released. And I also have, like, you know, sequels that I talked about in this video. I have the sequel to The Surviving Sky, which is The Unrelenting Earth. I have book number 3 in The Expanse, Abaddon's Gate, that I need to read. I need to read the 3rd book in J.S. Dew's The Last Watch trilogy. I also have J.S. Dew's other book, which I should have brought down. I've read a little bit of it, but I was in a depressive episode when I was reading it, and it's not a good book to read during that. This is it's that new movie with Robert Pattinson where he dies all the time and gets reborn, reprinted. That kind of a vibe, that's what this one gives me. Also, like the How to Become a Dark Lord and Die Trying, like that not reincarnation, but like reprinted, you're not allowed to die, Groundhog Day type situation, but you're not reliving the same day, you're just being brought back from death. That's what this one is, and there's apparently a really interesting AI in here. So I'm excited to read it now that I'm not in a depressive episode. I have so many things on my TBR, but I want you to tell me more sci-fi books that you absolutely loved, please. And we're just gonna gush about sci-fi books in the comments, because as a certified fantasy girly, sci-fi is pretty great. And if you have not yet tried sci-fi because you're a little scared of it, trust me, there's a way in. It's not all scary space operatic stuff. You can find the closer to home sci-fi. You can find the dystopian sci-fi. You can find the fun sci-fi. You can find the fantasy sci-fi. You can find the branches. There is so many similarities between fantasy and sci-fi in the genres that, listen, if you like fantasy, you are going to like sci-fi too. You just have to find the right ones. And you just have to find the right in, because they're not all the same. And that's what I love about genres. And vice versa. If you like sci-fi and you haven't read a lot of fantasy, pick it up, man. You just don't like magic and elves, then find a different kind of fantasy, my guy. There's more to fantasy than just magic and elves. So anyways, my friends, I'm gonna leave this here. Thank you so much for watching. And again, as a reminder, leave me some recommendations down below for some more sci-fi books. And if you've read any of these, tell me how much you like them. If you didn't like any of these, tell me if you didn't like them either, why they didn't work for you. That could help people watching this video narrow down what they want to try. So I hope you found at least one recommendation from this video, if not 2 or like all of them. But I will catch you guys in another one very soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.